Good afternoon. Today is March the 11th. Welcome to the bill hearings for the Ways and Means Committee. We have one hearing today, House Bill 1515. Let's welcome Delegate Moon to the committee. Welcome, Mr. Majority Leader. Would you like me to call up your panel, or are you going to start off on your own, or?
Like to have a panel with
Okay,
me.
okie dokie. We have Benjamin Orr, Samantha Zwirling, and Denise Gilmore. Please come on up. Whenever you're ready, Delegate Moon.
Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I truly do apologize for dragging a few of you in earlier than you had intended and off schedule. But I don't do that very lightly. As you know, I have started this session and before this session with a very nervous eye towards what's going on with the state budget and our projections, along with what that means for our commitments to things like public education and robust services, especially in the coming out years. So I guess you could say I intended House Bill 1515 to be a bit of a conversation starter. It is intended to put on the table among your revenue options a different approach to at least provide a point of reference and contrast, and that is to attempt to address our out-year deficits and blueprint funding issues with a single vote. That is in contrast to the other road ahead of us, which is attempting to cobble together a revenue package out of many disparate options until we get to the desired number. I do not believe it's fiscally prudent for us to delay vetting all of the options. I believe we need to start that process now, no matter what our partners in government think that timeline should be. I do believe that is the fiscally prudent approach. And by doing so, we have updated fiscal projections, such as those you have in the fiscal note for House Bill 1515, that provide us a bit of a blueprint and a roadmap for some additional revenue options in the coming years. So it's a very simple bill. In short, it reduces the sales tax rate from 6% to 5%, which would put us below all of our neighbors that apply a sales tax. Pennsylvania, West Virginia, DC, Virginia, we would be lower, but it would broaden the tax base to include most services, except a handful of services that are exempt off the bat: nonprofit, health, religious, professional service, et cetera. So what is the revenue impact of making this shift? The services tax expansion brings in about $4 billion once fully phased in. And the sales tax reduction, that point, gives up about $1 billion once fully phased in. So that's a net of $3 billion from what many economists would believe is a modernizing of the economy. This idea is not mine. I did cut and paste this thing in whole cloth from a very, very, very smart gentleman, one of my predecessors, the former majority leader who now works for our governor. Delegate Lukey brought this bill in 2020. I listened to hours and hours and hours of the testimony on that bill and gained a lot of insight. And I hope that the discussion today will provide further insight for a robust revenue conversation. So I will concede a few things. If you look through the testimony, there's a wide range of opinion on the bill. One of the things people worry about, and it's discussed in the fiscal note, and it's discussed in some of the testimony of my panelists here with me, and this is the concern about tax pyramiding, where some of the services fees, if they're business-to-business fees, will start getting rolled in on the consumer anyway. I have drafted a preempted amendment, again, so that we have a robust conversation of all the options on the table. If you were to remove the B2B services from this bill, I think a good number of the people sitting behind me would go away. If we did not reduce the sales tax rate and simply added in limited numbers of services, as many states have done and are beginning to discuss, you will start to get additional revenue options. Removing the B2B services, but expanding the services tax would still yield $700 or $800 million for the general fund and our commitments. So I will leave it there, because I really am just trying to kick off what I think is a very necessary conversation. For a couple points of reference for you to think about before I turn it over to my panelists. Again, this is a pretty widely discussed problem, the shift of our economy, every state away from the purchase of goods and into services. In the 70s, 40% of consumer spending was on goods, and that's closer to 30% today. And so with the sales tax being the second largest source of revenue for the general fund, if we leave that be, it has consequences. We have already undertaken a number of tax reforms over the years. You'll be familiar with some of them. First, an expansion of the sales tax into internet, expanding it into digital services and goods. And now here, I think we're looking at what I think is a necessary question about whether we ought to look at additional expansion into services. Again, it's a more progressive way of balancing out the tax code. It keeps taxation on consumption, and it shifts us away from relying on overly aggressive sales taxes. If we do not do this, and we do wish to address the deficit and out-year blueprint issues through these types of mechanisms, we're left with few other options. We can increase the sales tax rate. That is even more regressive. We can engage in cuts. I know that some want to go down that road, or we do something else. So like I said, this is a conversation starter. And with that, I will turn it over to my panelists. They happen to be FWA, I know, favorable with amendment. That's a little bit of an unusual posture. But the larger top line message I'm trying to talk about here is I do believe we need to get going on the conversation about what the heck we're going to do about our deficits and the commitments we have made to public education investment in Maryland. So with that, I'll turn it over to my panelists.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Majority Leader. My name is Benjamin Orr. I am the President and CEO of the Maryland Center on Economic Policy, and we are favorable with amendments on House Bill 1515. As you all have been discussing throughout this legislative session, Maryland needs significant and sustainable revenue sources to maintain our commitment to good schools and the many other essential public services that we need to support thriving communities. And as one of our largest existing revenue sources, adjusting the sales tax is an effective way to raise a significant amount of revenue quickly. However, as the sales tax does disproportionately fall on working families, those changes should be well targeted and ideally should be part of a larger revenue package that expands working family tax credits and asks more of the wealthy corporations and individuals who pay a smaller share of their income and taxes today. There are good reasons to expand the sales tax to include some services. As Delegate Moon mentioned, physical goods make up a declining share of consumer spending, and it is inconsistent from a policy perspective that we have decided to charge a sales tax on shampoo, but not spa treatments. We have already started down this path by ensuring that digital goods and streaming services are subject to the same sales tax as tangible books, CDs, and DVDs. And broadening the sales tax to include other services would be a reasonable next step. For many Marylanders, the benefits of the public services the state could afford with additional revenue would outweigh the additional expense. As outlined in our written testimony, we are recommending some amendments to this bill and are happy to continue working with Delegate Moon on those amendments. In particular, it is important to continue to exempt some business-to-business services from the sales tax to avoid those costs being passed on to consumers. There may also be types of essential personal services that you want to exempt, I'll note that childcare is already exempt. And that, as Delegate Moon said, it may be that we need to not lower the rate while exempting some services. So there's some balancing to be done there. Again, we ask for favorable with consideration of these amendments.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Denise Gilmore, and I am the Legislative Director for AFSCME Maryland. We represent 45,000 state, county, and municipal employees across Maryland. We sincerely want to thank Delegate Moon for bringing this bill. We are favorable with amendments as well. Look, we're not in a position to turn down revenue at this point. We support, bringing in revenue into the state. We think this should be part of several considerations that the legislator consider this year for increasing revenue. Look, this is important for us. I know I testified in this committee before about how the last time we were faced with similar budget difficulties, we pursued some measures that unfortunately balanced the budget on the backs of state employees. We want to work with you all to hopefully do that differently this year. Revenue is, a better path, certainly in our opinion, to take than to look at cutting from services that I know that many of us don't want to cut, right? Transportation, community college aid, cutting from our state employees. This is a viable alternative to that. And it will help set us up so that we can ensure that these services are still here for future generations. So we appreciate your deliberations and your consideration of this revenue option and several others before your committee today. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and members of the committee. I'm Samantha Zwirling here on behalf of the Maryland State Education Association, representing 75,000 educators across the state. As others on the panel have said, we are here with favorable with amendments. We appreciate the sponsor and many on this committee for understanding and acknowledging the need for new revenue. And we believe that modernizing Maryland's antiquated tax structure is an important part of being able to fund the priorities like public education. We recommend, as my colleague Denise just said, making this part of a proposal for a larger tax reform package that includes closing corporate loopholes, ensuring wealthy families pay their fair share, and enabling counties and local governments to raise the revenue that they need to meet their commitments to the blueprint. Currently, the state's blueprint commitment is only funded through FY26. And like the state, counties are also asking for the ability to raise revenue to meet their obligations. The blueprint, we know, we've talked about it a lot in this committee, is working. You've had presentations from superintendents talking about some of the things that are happening because of the new blueprint funding. Those things include a Chinese teacher in a classroom that's never had one or a school that's never had one. These wraparound services that we're also committed to in our community schools. Staff to deal with behavioral issues with students before they become disciplinary issues and violent issues. And we need our highly qualified educators to make sure that kids can get back on track from the pandemic. Supporting our schools requires strong action to meet the urgency of this moment. And as schools are struggling with addressing many things while also trying to serve their students, we need revenue to make sure that we can continue to implement this plan that took years to come up with, and that it does not fall prey to ending the funding like previous plans have. We need to keep going so our schools can be world-class like we all need them to be. And with that, MSEA report on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. And I want to first start out by thanking Mr. Majority Leader, Delegate Moon, for bringing this for discussion to our committee, because this is what the committee does, whether people like it or not, is we are the revenue committee. And so that's our job. And folks have heard me say plenty of times that I'm committed to the blueprint. I do not believe we should backtrack it, because then we are picking winners and losers, depending on what zip code you live in terms of our children's education. And that is something that we should not be doing as a state. So I'm committed to our children, I'm committed to our teachers, and we just have to have the tough discussions and figure it out, quite frankly. So with that, I will open it up for a conversation, and I'll start with Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you to our Majority Leader in my district, Maid, for bringing this bill. I concur with Madam Chair. Our committee really has the responsibility of identifying revenue given our shortfall, which last week we learned has even wider of a gap than we anticipated. So it's important that we thoroughly take a look at every single proposal. In terms of your testimony, Mr. Majority Leader, I just heard you talk about an amendment. I didn't catch the amendment that you're drafting or the change that you're bringing forward. Could you please share what we can anticipate in terms of what that is?
Sure. And let me start here. This bill is a discussion point. You can go in many directions with how you take this, but my bottom line here is I'm asking this committee to truly discuss an expansion of services into the sales tax regime. Which among those you choose to bring in, I think that's a key question. Some states, a small number, have said all the services are rolled in to the tax unless we've specifically excluded them. Others have gone in the other direction and they've specifically added in certain services to the sales tax. Kentucky in 2018 added 17 services, auto repair, dry cleaning, pet grooming, among them. The amendment that I'm discussing, again, the bill before you, HB 1515, is starting on the broad end of your conversation. I wanted to have a fiscal note for you that showed you the full option here, all the services in that you can possibly withstand, and you can start deleting out from there. The amendment I pre-drafted for discussion attempts to remove B2B services, those services where the customer is not a household consumer, it is another business. Again, there's some discussion in the economic literature on both sides of the spectrum that there's a risk of those getting passed on to the consumer. And so, again, as a model for discussion, I have pre-drafted what is essentially an amendment discussed in the MDCEP testimony. And if you do that, and you can just take a look at the fiscal note, on one of the pages, there's a little table that shows you what the various categories of service taxes would yield: personal care, information technology, things of that nature. And again, if you remove the B2B services, you will still yield something on the order of several $100 million. Again, if that's where this committee chooses to go. But that would, to me, would be the middle option. You know, the high option would be you go with the states that have put everything in. There's a middle option where you exclude B2B. And then there's a very light option if you are looking at this in a basket of services or revenue options, where you do what a number of other states have done and you selectively roll in services into the tax regime. But again, all of this would be in line with what a lot of people have suggested we do. Peter Francho in 2019 was warning about this shift in the economy. And again, I think the majority leader in 2020 recognized this as one of the options that ought to be on the table. And at that time, as you know, we were seeking to address blueprint funding. So that is one of the amendments that is a possible road for the future.
Delegate Griffin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Leader, for bringing this bill. And I've been very much looking forward to this conversation. So a couple of my concerns about the piece of legislation. So, one of my concerns, I certainly understand why the governor may be opposed to this, because this certainly feels like taking from the poor and giving to the less poor, because a lot of these services are consumed by average low to middle income Marylanders who drive a lot of this. MBIA. So my first question is, MBIA 4 years ago, and they reaffirmed it this year, says that this will impact first home ownership by about $10,000 per home, just for inflation, probably $13,000, but also the cost for an individual to maintain a home, and to have a really crushing and regressive effect on home ownership in Maryland, something we're trying as a body to work very hard to solve this year. So my first question, can you speak to the impact on home ownership and maintaining a home?
It's a very interesting question. When I sat and listened to the hours of Ways and Means testimony from 2020, I literally took out a pen and pad made some notes on possible amendments. In one version, there was get rid of the B2B services. In another version, it was looking at excluding housing impact costs. And I almost had that as a second amendment drafted for discussion today. But I thought, why do that? This is the job of your committee, once this bill is in your hands, to look at options. And I encourage the exact conversation that you are starting here, because again, like I said, you can go with what some of the other states have done and slowly ease in services selectively. If you want to avoid things that you think have housing impact costs, because that's a concern, that's certainly well within the orbit of this committee. But I think we have to start having this conversation.
Thank you. My next question is around the amendment and some of the carve-outs created there. One of my concerns is, one of the reasons this is a difficult conversation is because so many advocates come out in opposition to this, whether it's B2B, whether it's, direct to consumer, things of that nature. My concern is if we make these special carve-outs, we are therefore creating winners and losers. And then if the only community opposed to this type of legislation left is the B2B, and we bring that bill into future, then they're kind of on an island. So I guess my concern is, if, related to winners and losers, why should the pet groomer, be punished by this bill when the business attorney may not be? Can you speak a little bit to that?
Well, so the theory on the B2B services, again, it's not I just offer this as a point of discussion. I'll leave it to the economists to go further into the details. But the idea is you're taxing consumption is the goal of this regime. And if you tax B2B services, they may end up getting rolled into the consumer price anyway. Again, this is not my argument. This is an argument that I gleaned from testimony and reading. And so I put that in, again, just as an option. But as to your question about picking winners and losers, I would suggest that our current tax regime already does that. We were hurting the mom and pops previously when the internet sales were going untaxed. We tried to deal with that. And now that we're moving from physical CDs to MP3s and things like that and streaming now, you're even away from a digital good and into a digital service where you're licensing IP for some temporary period of time. The nature, but it's music, right? I'm a huge music consumer. It's the same thing. I've been tracking from cassette. My mom had 8 tracks, but we go all the way on to now, and I use Spotify streaming. But why should one escape taxation that the other previously had? And again, the one that's truly going to get hurt in the choosing of winners and losers here are the mom and pops, the brick and mortars that are here within the confines of Maryland right now, because they're the ones that are getting taxed with a regressive sales tax. So again, if you look at this from the overall look at the tax structure and everything that's going on, I think what's going on now is picking winners and losers, and it's doing it in a way that's unsustainable for our budget because of the changes in consumer spending and technology.
And one last question. Thank you, Madam Chair, just because I didn't have a chance to fully review the amendment. This is dealing with agricultural exemptions. In the original bill, there was no exemption for agricultural. Does your amendment deal with anything like tax, like nutrient application and aerial cover for crop planting by agribusinesses?
To be honest, I don't have the amendment in front of me. I have to line up the NAICS codes. But again, if that's your concern, and that's a specific concern, say food price or something like that, pull it up.
Right. Thank you, Madam Chair.
May I respond 30 seconds? I would just add on to what Delegate Moon said, in that, you're right. We should be concerned about services that are necessities and the impact on low income Marylanders. But I think that the 2 points that I would make is, one, when you look at the data, higher income households actually spend a much greater percentage of their income on services than lower income households. So there is kind of built in a little bit of tax progressivity in focusing on services. And also the idea that you can focus on services that are necessities and exclude them, whether it's, childcare is already written out of the bill. We don't tax food already, things like that. So I would just mention that as part of the answer to the question. But there's also other tools we could expand the earned income tax credit or the child tax credit in partnership with something like this, for example. So I'll stop there.
Delegate Hornberger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did have a couple questions like my colleague. One on the types of services and then two about when someone else is paying for the service. So I'll stick to the NICS code questions first. In terms of insurance providers, financial advisors, these folks are more incentivized and paid via commissions or fees. So will those folks be taxed on those commissions and fees because they're already taxed as income?
That's a good question. And actually, believe it or not, one of the notes I flagged for myself, it's an unanswered question, is when you have intersection with federal investment guidelines, whether some of this has to get pulled. But I actually don't know, again, because I'd have to line up the NAICS codes and see what's in or out. And I don't have an answer to that. So I'll have to put a pin on that.
Okay, thank you. And then the second question is, I looked at a list of the NICS codes that were provided under the bill, and there are a few in there that are disproportionately aimed towards low income. Those would include coin operated laundromats, money orders, and taxis. It's sometimes hard to drill down to just say taxis and not say limousines, or to just say coin operated laundry and not dry cleaning. So what would be your recommendation on where there's some crossover there between low income and high income?
So look, if you're going with a broad framework and you're going to move into taxing services, it allows you to do things like lower the sales tax rate, and you make the world less regressive, make a winner out of Maryland brick and mortar retailers. If we start going in the other direction, I would be 100% in favor of your selection method being aimed at removing the most regressive applications of a service tax regime. Again, exactly what you're talking about, things that would go to lower income households, I would think would be the first things that ought to come out.
Yeah, and I forgot to say this at the beginning. I love the part about the reduction on the sales tax to 5%. That's
your FWA.
That's an amazing part of the bill. The last question I have, and this deals with providing the service and who's paying for it. So I noticed that explicitly tax preparation is included in the NICS codes under the bill as written. So if I go to a tax clinic at a for-profit tax preparer, and that service is subsidized by the state. This happens both in tax preparation and also in legal services. So I receive the service, the state or some nonprofit pays for it. However, it's a for-profit entity. Who pays the tax?
That's a good question. I don't know, and I guess the answer would be however that's handled now.
And if I could answer how it's handled now.
Yeah, well, currently it's.
As the CEO of a nonprofit who purchases services from for-profit organizations, I simply give them my sales tax exemption, and I don't pay the sales tax on that purchase, whether it's IT or human resource consultant or whatever. But as a nonprofit or as the government, as a nonprofit entity, you would not be charged the sales tax on that item because you're already excluded because of your existing sales tax exemption.
But it's a service. So I looked up
it wouldn't matter. I mean, there are services that we purchase that I like internet access or that are already taxed. Or if I purchase a CD, an MP3 for something, like I can submit my tax exempt card to the retailer and be exempt. So there's a process already in place to do that. I think it's a valid concern, but I think ask counsel, but my understanding based on my experience as a CEO of a nonprofit purchasing for-profit services is that there is an existing process to exempt you from that.
So are you treating it as a gift?
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
It's not a gift because I am paying the purchase price, but I am not paying the sales tax because as a nonprofit, 501c3 nonprofit, I am exempt from the sales tax.
Okay, so if you, the nonprofit, give, let's say, $50,000 to a for-profit tax preparer, and you say, I want this $50,000 earmarked for low-income folks only, they have to qualify, in other words.
So that would be a grant, not a purchase, and I don't make grants. So I would suggest talking to someone like the Maryland Philanthropy Network or something like that. I don't think that would be taxed, but because that's not a situation I find myself in, I'm not entirely sure. If I was contracting with that tax preparer to provide services, say I got a grant for $50,000 and then I contracted with H&R Block or whoever, then because I'm the person or the organization purchasing the service, I can get an exemption on the sales tax in that way.
I
But
agree
as a
with you.
grant, I'm not totally sure.
Okay, is there somebody from council that could answer that? Okay, great. Thanks so much.
Okay, Delegate Henson, no questions? Okay. Delegate Feldmark? Okay, thank you. Delegate Roberts?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have, well, I don't know how quick it is, but I just wanted to know, do you have any specific examples of the impact that other states, like a state that has done this and how it has impacted them positively or negatively?
One of my panelists might have a brief answer on that. I don't have data in front of me. What I can tell you is the fiscal note writers have built in a series of assumptions, among them being that if you were to go with some full approach, as contemplated in the bill as introduced, you might have a wobble of 5% down reduction in consumption purchases of services, based on this new tax adjustment. So it's not free. This is not free money. Believe me, I'm not suggesting that at all. And I do think we need to be cognizant of what some of these impacts will be, but the fiscal note writers are assuming a 5% loss in services consumed potentially, and then some annual decrease. But again, if you were to do it in tandem with the sales tax reduction, there's a gain in retailers contemplated from the same effect. So hard to say, but again, that is a fair question, and it's among, I think, the things you need to think about in how you approach this.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Delegate Buckle?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's good to see you, my friend. I apologize. I was a couple minutes late, had to drive through all those work zones, that we talked about the other day on the way down here. Slow me down a bit. I appreciate intellectually what you're trying to do. But when you say over and over again, that's something we had to think about, the committee will have to work on it, we don't know the answer to that, we'd have to look into that. Do you think that really can be done now? I mean, there's no Senate crossfile of this. I've spoken to lots of people in the Senate. They have no interest in it. What is the value of doing this late in the game, this session, from your perspective? How can we force what would be, even with your amendment, and I'll ask you a question about that in a minute, a multi-billion-dollar, according to the fiscal note, even if we eliminate B2B, multi-billion-dollar tax increase? Got a lot of questions. We don't really know what to do. Governor Moore said over and over again he doesn't want things like this session. Senate said it over and over again. What's the point in us on crossover week doing this?
I can't control what other people do. I can only do what makes sense, in my opinion, for Maryland and the House. And again, we just had another write down in our projected revenues. Our books are off by another $250 million, but it's actually $500 million we got to make up just this year, and that's a change that happened from December to now.
Right, and that reflects that our sales tax revenues are already, the existing sales taxes, they keep going down, which would be an indicator that people's ability to go out and buy things. So I sat in the briefing last week. The two reasons that our revenue write-downs occur is because we're getting less from income taxes. So people are making less money per se. And we're getting less in sales taxes. They're spending less money per se. Do you think economically we should impose new burdens on them?
I'm not an economist, but I can do some basic math. And what I would suggest is, again, we have $500 million to make up right now. we're looking at several billion in the future. And yes, as you point out, the sales tax and income tax upon which we are counting on to make up this imaginary revenue is declining.
Because our economy is weak.
So you might
I-
allow that to go in a certain direction. And if I'm looking at the same thing and what's about to happen, I don't want that direction. I would like us to meet our obligations, the ones we already voted on.
See, I agree with that. I look at it in my household though. So if I came to my family and I said, you deserve more. My family deserves more, believe me, more than what I can give them. And I said, next year, Dad's going to go out and I'm going to buy us $1 million house. I'm going to do it. You deserve it. You want it. You should have it. You should have all the accoutrements. You should have the best house possible because damn it, you deserve it. Daddy's going to do it. And yet I went out the next year and I couldn't make enough money, honestly, to pay for that. I wouldn't turn around and raise my fees to my clients, which is how I make my living. I wouldn't go out and steal money from other individuals. I'd have to face the reality and say, my dreams of what I want to give you, my family, my constituents, don't meet the realities of the money that I have. Do you think that's a valid way to look at it?
Here's the way I would look at this. Let's just go back to the basics of the social contract, government and taxes. I know you like to think about things in this sort of philosophical.
We're having a very
so I'm
Thomas Paine discussion.
going to take it where you want to go. And what I would say is this: the concept of taxes, what this government has been attempting to undertake for years, financing constitutionally required public education, roads, transportation infrastructure, workforce development. These are all the things that we've said our taxes should go to. We've by and large as a society agreed on this, and this is what we're here to do. Now, if we have an economy where in the 40s, we decided to start imposing a sales tax, well, the concept for that sales tax would have been to support the brick and mortars, the roads, the electricity infrastructure that goes to those businesses, the freight, all of that, right? That's government putting that in. It's an investment we do for those businesses to succeed. Well, you fast forward the economy. We've been looking at tons of bills at workforce development in a services economy. We're pumping money into it. The businesses are asking us to do this. What is the difference in the state investment in that services economy that is now a growing share of our economy? Why is that an unfair thing? The taxpayers are supporting it. Why is it unfair for that investment not to be likewise recouped in the way we do with sales taxes? It doesn't make sense to me.
So
you're picking winners and losers.
Well,
I would make.
excuse me, sir. What I'm looking at is the only people who are testifying favorably on this bill today, apparently from what on the sheet that I was given, is AFSCME, Maryland Center on Economic Policy, and the Maryland State Education Association. It's just you. There's 1, 2, 3, 4.
Delegate,
There's 8 pages.
I can't
of
remember the
people who
last
opposed
time
the bill.
someone came in to testify in favor of a tax on themselves.
Okay, but you're
So
suggesting
that's not
that
a
everyone,
surprising factoid.
but you're suggesting if I was a businessman and I thought that this tax was going to help me grow and help the economy of the state of Maryland grow, why wouldn't I support it? You're saying that the taxes that we impose have this net universal positive effect as part of the social compact. And what I'm suggesting is in Maryland, we've gone past that. We've reached the level where our taxes are already providing the services that exist, the governmental services and programs that exist.
But they're not.
Well, you can say that, sir. You can say that, sir. Has anyone ever won a lawsuit in the state of Maryland suggesting that they weren't given a constitutionally mandated education, that our public education system is so bereft, is so decrepit, that we have violated the mandates of the Maryland Constitution that are cited all the time for why we need more money? Has anyone ever won a lawsuit that says that?
There are many people who would argue that they have, and there are lawsuits that have been filed, and we have DLS recommendations that say projections that we're going to be short by $3 billion by 2026.
Has anyone
The
ever won a
point
lawsuit?
is that
Sir.
the shift from sales tax The decline in sales tax is because of the shift from goods to services in our economy, among many
There's no
other
decline in
things.
sales tax.
And if you were in the situation that we as a state are in, you would increase your income, not just cut back for your family.
Sir, there's no decline in sales taxes in a real number. The decline is in the projection. We're still
That's
collecting more
what I'm
sales
saying, the
taxes than what
economy
we
is
collected
changing
2 or
over
3
time.
years ago. We're just spending way more money. So if I say I want to buy something that's $100,000 and I only have $75,000 coming in, your
You would go
solution
out and
is
find
just
another
tax it
job.
up.
Okay, is there a question on?
Yeah,
the
I have
table?
some other questions if you don't mind for on some specifics for the bill sponsor. Thank you, Madam Chair. Delegate, would this bill also impose a 5% tax on trash services? Like I got to pay somebody 5% on top of what my trash bill is to take my trash out?
Remediation and waste services is one of the categories. There are subcategories within it. If you're offended by one particular bit being included, again,
It's not offense. I'm just trying to find out what we'd really be talking about for average folks. And my colleague from Cecil County asked this, and I'm not sure that we know, and I think you've been very candid, we don't know. We've already imposed in Maryland taxes on certain digital services. We have a digital services tax already that we passed a couple of years ago that's supposed to be paying for the blueprint, but as we've all found out, not enough money there to pay for anywhere close to the blueprint. So would this bill now tack 5% as a sales tax on top of the existing tax for digital services?
some of these taxes are capped. If you're talking about combining the local and
No, I'm talking about
just straight off the top. I don't know if it's actually doubled up on here. Again, I don't have the NAICS codes lined up in front of me, so I can't answer in that level of detail.
in my last one, delivery services. So there's another proposal by the chair of the Environment and Transportation Committee to impose a 50 cent across the board delivery tax. Your proposal would be 5% of the gross value. If someone gets delivered $100 worth of goods, they pay $5 instead of 50 cents.
Their delivery services are contemplated here. As to whether you're taxing it on the delivery fee component versus the aggregate sales amount, I believe it would be on the service component there. But again, whether they're going to do what E&T proposes or what this committee wants to do, we can see. I don't contemplate you're going to have triple, services taxes layered onto a single Uber ride or something like that. That can get worked out. But again, you're asking levels of detail that I'm hoping we get to in precisely the conversation you don't think we need to have. But I do think we need to have exactly the conversation you are now engaging with me in, precisely because of the fiscal challenges facing us, Delegate. And I just will remind you, because I know you want to bring it down to the burdens, but here's the other concern. And we had the opportunity to talk about this in several meetings, as you know, but I look at the overall state of the Maryland economy, the comptroller's report, our competitiveness, our ability to fund our transportation infrastructure and to fund how our workforce gets around, our workforce development, our childcare, our housing, basic government, the reasons we're here. This is all at risk right now, staring at budget projections like we are seeing. And I have reminded myself of this many times. I'm from Montgomery County, and I can think of two recent economic development battles that we have tried to engage in. One was when your friend, Governor Hogan, was trying to land the Amazon HQ2 headquarters in a national competition, which we did not win. And suddenly it turned out that to get a big Fortune 500 headquarters here, the things they wanted were transit, dense housing with amenities, ways to get around, workforce that's been invested in, and education.
There's a lot of
And
that
we
in
lost.
Montgomery County, though, right?
I'm just telling you, this was the problem. Marriott then wanted to move its headquarters, and it moved from a suburban part of Montgomery County, and thankfully we kept them. They moved to a transit
So
service.
we gave them $25 million in tax breaks. to do
All
that, right?
Delegate, all of these things are the types of things you and the minority party would point out as the things we need to defend against. How are we supposed to put ourselves in that position of economic competitiveness staring at these revenue figures.
Are you, okay. Would any of these monies under your bill go to the Transportation Trust Fund?
You can certainly,
Under your bill, under the analysis that I have sitting
They
here
are-
on the Monday
they-
before crossover, let me
the
finish
way
first, please.
the way this
Is it
bill
one
is
at a time or
drafted,
just for me?
this is to the general fund.
It's just for
Some
me.
of that is already pegged to the blueprint, but that's the way it's drafted. I would not be opposed to a dedication to transportation and education, if that would so be the desire.
Great. So under your bill and your amendment, your now amendment saying we're taking out the B2B services, which is $2.6 million of the 4.16 total revenue estimate. So that leaves us with a little about 1.6 million. If we split that between the Transportation Trust Fund and the blueprint, under your bill and your amendment, we wouldn't pay for anywhere near the blueprint costs, right? Because the blueprint costs are 2.8 million in the red in 2027
You have a number of proposals that have been discussed in
Billion.
this committee.
with a B.
And I have suggested that you have a few ways to go.
So we'd have to do,
You could do a slimmed down version of this along with other things. You could do this.
so no matter how we do it, to pay for the blueprint, you would agree with me, we have to do the biggest tax increase in modern Maryland history.
No. I don't think that's the case.
How do we raise the 2.8 billion dollars in revenue?
There are a number of options before you.
They're all
Some of them-
tax
Some of them
increases.
are closing loop. No, some of them are closing loopholes. I don't agree with that frame at all.
So you think that if we
There are-
change something,
There are fees, I've seen fees being
Fees.
proposed. I've seen penalties being proposed. I've seen, increased enforcement. There's a range of options before loopholes being closed.
thank you.
Delegate Moon, just a couple of quick follow-up questions. So you and I, we came in together and so did our good friend here from Allegheny County, which makes us the old heads. It's only a couple more people older than us here, which is a little crazy. This is our 10th session here. And so I think I've gotten to know you pretty well since we've been here. We served 7 years on Judiciary Committee together. So is it your opinion that this is the responsible thing to do, given our commitments, in particular to the blueprint? It is the responsible thing to do in terms of taking a look at it?
I think it's absolutely the fiscally responsible thing to do, but I also think it's the morally responsible thing to do. I was among those who was resistant to the concept of us voting for all that blueprint spending, the public education investment, which is what it is, and then leaving town without also simultaneously voting in the way to pay for it. And now here we are, we split the votes up. So folks got to take the freebie and vote for the education spending. And we are left to have the adult conversation about what to do next. So thank you, Madam Chair.
And after being here for pretty much a decade at this point, and the question was posed to you, why is this coming up the week of crossover? I mean, we've seen plenty of things come up the week of crossover that ultimately pass. Isn't that true?
Yes, it is, Madam Chair.
And isn't it true that we can never predict what our friends across the street are going to do because they're not going to do something until they do it? Isn't that correct?
Also true, Madam Chair.
Okay. I think that my next question is for Ms. Zwirling. And the statement was made that the taxes that we have already have a net universal positive effect. And so my question is, that statement to me does not ring true when we're talking about education. I represent Howard County. So can you just, does Howard County have the same level of education as my friends from Baltimore City, or as my friends from the shore, from certain parts of Montgomery County? I mean, is all education equal right now, and all children have the same opportunity, and all teachers are getting their correct rate of pay and on a career ladder and the same opportunities for advancement? Is all of that happening right now? Are we exactly where we should be?
Unfortunately not.
Okay, thank you. Next, Delegate Long.
Thank you, Madam Chair. These new tax increases Aren't they going to pass through to the consumers?
I do believe we are attempting for household spending to include services. Some of the ones that are at risk of being passed on to consumers by way of a B2B service, we can discuss about amending out.
Right. One of the things that really jumped out at me was funeral services. And I always made fun, there's two things certain, and that's taxes and death. Now they're going to get money out of my pocket when they put me in the ground. Right. I'm just being honest. Back, I remember the conversation we had back when the blueprint was originally talked about. The Governor Hogan actually foreseen what was going to happen. And now we are paying the piper. It's unfortunate. The other thing, I could go on and on about a lot of the things in this bill. Just for instance, they're talking about fuel for marinas. They say they're talking about red dye and trucks because they pay fuel taxes. The thing of it is, it doesn't differentiate between home heating oil or diesel fuel for a truck. I mean, for a boat or for any of the marine equipment that's operated down at Dundalk Marine Terminal. I had a long discussion with someone down there. If this comes into effect, how it's going to affect the Port of Baltimore because of all the diesel that's utilized down there. I mean, we have services that's going to be charged on remodeling services, insurance, real estate fees. I mean, it can go on and on and on. I remember this conversation. We had it with Delegate Lukey back, I think it was 2020. And, at one time, I thought we had this all worked out. I know that we have a shortfall of $3 billion. Maybe we need to cut. I know this is not going to be popular, but we need to look at how we're spending money.
Okay, no clapping, no cheering. If you can't control yourself, please step outside. Thank you.
I'm sorry if that was popular, but
do you have a question, Delegate Long?
yes. Do you believe that with our economy the way it is right now, and our property taxes going up and everything going up, you believe consumers can, if once it's passed through them, they can keep affording all these new taxes?
I do think so, actually. Again, we're talking about tailoring this to what makes sense. You had one of your delegates ask, should we try to remove some things that are going to hit low-income consumers more? And I said, yes. You raise an issue about, should we pull death taxes out of there? I don't like the sound of that. So sure, throw that on the chopping block. Again, this is the conversation we need to have. This is look, there are a ton, again, I started from a bill that had all of the services in there. Right. We can go around the circle, everyone talking about a service they think they don't want in there. That's fine. That's the purpose of this bill and this hearing. It's exactly this conversation. Right. Some of them are going to be more appropriate to include than others. I concede that from the top of this conversation. So don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to include everything that's in this bill. And I came here with 3 FWA, favorable with amendment panelists, who are suggesting their own tweaks to the bill. Everybody's got a different way of cutting this. I'm sure if I took the single NAICS code that some of these people are sitting here who represent, they would not be here. Obviously, why would they waste their time on a Monday morning being here for a tax that did not apply to them? So again, we have already made the commitment to invest in public education, and we have serious transportation funding shortfalls in all of our communities. Everybody's trying to get their individual community project back in. All the counties. I'm hearing from them all of the time. Something has to give.
Can I just add? I just want to, when we're discussing kind of cutting back spending, and kind of to the chair's point around the blueprint, we studied our school systems for years under the blueprint and under the Kerwin Commission. And I know folks here are very concerned about what has been described as failing schools. We know that we have underfunded some of our schools in places with the most concentrated poverty for decades, which is how we have gotten in a place where many of these schools are now considered failing. We have done a disservice to those students, and by The entire point of the blueprint is to invest in students and areas that need more support so we can get them to be thriving individuals and so they can come and be taxpayers and participate in the economy. So the blueprint, while it is about schools, is about poverty, it is about developing a workforce, and that's what we're investing here. It gets lost in the billions of dollars, but we're talking about kids who need an investment and to be able to then participate in our economy fully. Thank you.
If I might, you're talking about investment in our children. We have schools that are nonprofit, some charter schools, and some of these low income areas, they're succeeding.
Charter schools are public schools in the state of Maryland.
Okay, I'm sorry. Well, some of the charter schools that are in this area, certain areas, are succeeding and achieving what they need to do, and they're not costing as much money as some of the other schools are. Maybe the same, I don't know, but we need to look at education altogether, that's for sure. And I'll just say this real quick. This death tax kind of reminds me of the rain tax, and that was a nightmare. So, thank you.
Delegate Young.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Delegate, for the bill. Delegate, I just wanted to raise a few things because some questions were asked about lawsuit. And so I wanted to ask you, isn't it so that in 1994, the ACLU of Maryland brought Bradford versus Maryland State Board of Education for the purpose of ensuring that students in Baltimore City are receiving adequate funding for their schools?
I'm gonna have to assume the answer is yes.
Thank you. The answer is yes. It's also true, Mr. Delegate, that in 1996, Judge Joseph Kaplan found in Maryland, Bradford versus Maryland State Board of Education that the public school children in Baltimore City were not being provided with an education that is adequate when measured by contemporary educational standards. Following that, in 2004, we found that case stayed open. It was a consent decree that was entered into following 1996's ruling. And in 2004, the ACLU went back to court because the funding formula was being underfunded. At that case, the judge then stated in a memorandum opinion that the constitutional violation was still in effect. Following that, we passed the Thornton formula, and under the Thornton formula, we continue to underfund Baltimore City public schools to a maximum in 1 year of $290 million. I believe it was about $1 billion over 10 years, and over the full time, it was $3 billion since the beginning of the case. Is that correct? Do you recall anything of this sort, Delegate?
Yes, thank you.
So I say all of that to say, and additionally, as we think about charter schools, last week I had a bill across the hall on charter schools and particularly their facilities funding. We understand that charter schools are public schools, their children are our children. I sit on a couple charter school boards. We have about 6 of them in East Baltimore. And what I know about these charter schools is they too are underfunded and frankly are more underfunded than our traditional schools. So I say that to say to everybody here, and I mean, isn't that so, again, to conclude, historically, at least in the recent history, at least in the time that I was in Baltimore City Public Schools, and some of my colleagues also were in Baltimore City Public Schools, Maryland has chosen as a characteristic of this legislature and this government, when we underfund Baltimore City. I represent East and Northeast Baltimore City, where the worst facilities are, where some of the worst proficiency numbers are. And if we had those funds, and if we had those resources in those 20 years that I just referred to, I think we might have some 30 years, excuse me, we might have some different outcomes. So while that does not necessarily imply where I'm going to be on this bill, I know there's a lot of questions having to do with what we're planning to tax. I want to make sure that this conversation remains in the correct context and that we understand the specific groups of people who this legislature has historically impacted negatively when choosing where to put funds, when choosing winners and losers. Those losers have consistently been members of the 45th legislative district. And I want to make sure that as we move forward, we do not make those same choices. And I'm therefore grateful to the delegate for at least bringing this for a conversation so we can make sure we don't make those choices again. Thank you, Mr. Delegate, and thank you, Madam Chair.
And Delegate, if I can add one point on that, please, Madam Chair. While we're talking about yes, I do. And thank you for those comments. While we're talking about the children of Baltimore City, at the same time that we're struggling to fund education, Our child welfare department in the Baltimore City Department of Social Services is under a consent decree. They've been under a consent decree for the entire time I've been alive, largely because caseloads are so high and we don't have enough caseworkers, right? So I want to caution us against setting up this false choice between either funding education or funding other parts of our budget that are really important. The answer is we need more resources everywhere. And we do that by, pursuing great revenue choices that help, our general fund out. And because the alternative is cutting and there quite frankly is nothing left to cut. We cut $5 billion from pay and benefits from state employees during the Great Recession. We pursued across the board agency cuts that we are still dealing with in state government. There is nothing left to cut.
Delegate Miracle North.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ms. Major, for this robust conversation. You talked about exemption for childcare, but have you considered exemption for disability or adult care? If I am, who has a child but also has aging parents, and I have to perform, pay for services to upkeep their property, I'm exempt for the childcare possibly, but not for helping out my aging parents. Is that my understanding of the impact of this bill?
So the bill from the jump already has some pre-excluded categories: educational service, healthcare or social assistance service, service provided by a religious organization, grant making or giving, service provided by social advocacy group, civics. So basically nonprofits, healthcare, education, philanthropic, religious, a bunch of those. I would think that would be included, but again, if not, we can certainly talk about that.
Right. If I'm not just a child of, if someone has aging parents, I'm not an LLC. Do I have to now form an LLC to benefit from the bill as drafted, or you would consider the possible exemptions for those types of individuals like myself that's worrying about how to care for my aging parents, also having to care for my younger kid?
I wouldn't think you're talking about an uncompensated caregiver.
Yes.
No, I wouldn't think that would fall into the realm of the bill.
Okay. Thank you.
Delegate Fair.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you, Delegate, for bringing the bill forward. I know we've been having a lot of conversations on a philosophical level about what should or shouldn't happen, but Ms. Gilmore, I want to direct my questions to you because your comments that you made a moment ago drive in that this isn't a philosophical conversation. There is real world impacts to the decisions that we make when we choose not to fund our priorities. And you commented, and I had your testimony pulled up prior to you making that comment. We had a recession in this country, and we made the choice in 2008-9 that we were going to cut $5 billion from our budget on the backs of the employees that provide state services. Can you explain to us what that looked like for us beyond what happened in Baltimore City, but rather what happened in every community in Maryland?
Yeah, it was devastating. I mean, it was, you have our, when you pursue cuts to these lengths, you have our 24/7 staff going into our prisons, going into our state hospitals, into our juvenile facilities with a pay reduction, right? Because they can't take furloughs. For them, it's just a straight pay cut. For the staff that are able to take furloughs, you see a reduction in services because that's fewer days that they can be in the office working, right? The across the board agency cuts affected everything from disability services that the state was giving. We entered hiring freezes that we felt for essentially a decade. I mean, when Governor Moore took over office, we saw historic staffing shortages, almost 10,000, positions short. We're still climbing ourselves out of. I mean, we have had about over a decade worth of extreme austerity on state government, and this is where we are, right? And so there's, we've got to, again, it's cut or find alternatives. And, I just implore this committee to consider alternatives to cuts.
So some folks on the committee know this, but you may not. I actually worked in Annapolis as chief of staff from 2020 through 2022. And we saw the pandemic hit, and we saw a record number of people who became unemployed during that period. And we dealt with not a couple hundred challenges of people trying to file for unemployment and being blocked from access to their employment, rather tens of thousands of people being blocked from their state mandated benefits through that process. In your opinion, did that underfunding of the Department of Unemployment Insurance, the lack of number of resources, the lack of number of staff, because of austerity cuts that we have been making dating all the way back to the recession, it caused a lot of that backlog that we dealt with where people were stuck waiting up to 18 months to get their state mandated benefits. Has that been your experience?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Delegate Ebersol.
Chair, it's time to look at the big picture here. And I direct this to Sam Zwirling of MSDE. The blueprint's not just called the blueprint, it's called the blueprint for Maryland's future. If we're looking 5 or 10 years down the road, what do you see if the blueprint is fully implemented? What will happen to education and the kids in our state?
I think that the goal of the blueprint is that we see college, career, and I think someone said it at this in this committee, and community ready. We are working to make sure our students can get through their K through 12 education, that they are on a path to a career, and that they're able to function in our society. And we see that through their academic scores. We see that through their social emotional learning. As I mentioned before, this committee has been, concerned about disciplinary services. The blueprint also makes investments in special education, in our English language learners, in concentrations of poverty. We need to make sure that all students, as the chair referenced, have an access to a world education and not just those in a few zip codes.
And Maryland's on the vanguard of this concept, right? We're out in front of all the rest of the states in the United States. And so to the sponsor, I would say, wouldn't you say one of the drivers of our deficit, one of the things that we're worried about is the amount of money that we're going to commit to the children of our state. And this is really one of the reasons we're here. Is that accurate, or is that,
It's been keeping me up at night.
Thank you. And so, I think back to transportation, and I'm old enough to remember in the 70s, how much people griped about the Washington Metro, what a boondoggle it was. And guess what? We had another transportation project that was labeled a boondoggle about 6 or 7 years ago, and we saved a little money then, but now we don't have that transportation. If we don't make this move right now, then how are we going to answer for the future? And we're ready to go. So my question is it's driving it, but don't you feel this is the time when people say blithely, we need to make cuts? What cuts could they possibly be referring to? It sounds so general and easy, but I believe this particular program would be one of the major ones that's on the cutting board.
I think that's an inevitable conclusion. Like I said, I'm not an economist. I can do basic math, however, and when you're staring at the revenue projections, we are looking at, I do believe if we don't start addressing this now, we will be putting ourselves in a much more difficult position in the future. And I just don't, we're going to use one-time gimmicks, drain out all of our reserve cash, and then do that before a recession actually hits. Okay. Let's look at other options.
Thank you. That's my question, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. You all may be excused. You've been up here a very long time. We appreciate it. And I'm going to start calling folks up in groups of 5, and committee, just so everybody knows, everyone just gets one bite at the apple, not multiple turns here. So this is just in no particular order, in the order that I have folks signed up. Skip Flatko, Lisa May, Giovanni Hawkins, Greg Brown, Mike O'Halloran. And if we could just move from my right over.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the House Ways and Means Committee. For the record, my name is Michael O'Halloran, here today representing NFIB in Maryland. Thank you for the opportunity to present this. The comptroller's report noted that we have not only lost population recently, but more concerning is the fact that our economy is not growing. We're simply stagnant. The Nonpartisan Tax Foundation ranked Maryland 45th this year when it comes to its business tax climate index. This tax is another measure, albeit a very large and significant one, that adds to the cumulative effect of policy decisions by this body that unfortunately make the cost of doing business in Maryland very high. House Bill 1515 does not happen in a silo for small business owners. Employer paid sick leave, a minimum wage hike, and a yet to be implemented payroll tax for paid leave insurance are just a few items that add to this. If you look at the appendix of the fiscal note, there is not a single aspect of Marylanders' lives this tax hike wouldn't touch. Things like cutting grass, cutting hair, even the clown sculpting balloon animals at the county fair is getting hit by this. These things do not happen in a vacuum. It will lead to increased costs, not only on the backs of Maryland's small businesses, but also their clients and customers. So for these reasons, we respectfully request an unfavorable committee report. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and committee members. I'm Skip Falatko. I'm a CPA, and I'm here on behalf of 8,000 members of the Maryland Association of CPAs. As CPAs, we have big concerns over House Bill 1515 and the complexity of taxing services. It's difficult to source where the sale and delivery of professional services occurs, given today's world of remote work, out-of-state employees, offices in multiple states, and customers in multiple states. Complexity exponentially increases with multiple factors such as this. Many small businesses use outside CPA and accounting services, everything from bookkeeping, financial statement prep, and tax prep. This change would put smaller businesses in a competitive disadvantage against bigger businesses who have an in-house accounting staff. Taxpayers would be paying a tax on the services to get their taxes prepared, and it would feel like double taxation to them. And then finally, this will harm Maryland's business environment. In a geographically small state like Maryland, this would put us at a competitive disadvantage against those other nearby states who don't have a similar tax structure. We believe that other revenue generating strategies should be explored to ensure fairness and simplicity for all citizens and businesses. And for these reasons, the Maryland Association of CPAs respectfully requests an unfavorable report on House Bill 1515. There's additional detail in our written testimony, and I thank you for your time.
Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and Committee, thank you very much for the time. My name is Greg Brown. I own a restaurant, also a brewery, and also some real estate in Maryland. Prior to moving to Maryland about a year and a half ago, I lived in Pennsylvania. I own businesses in Pennsylvania. I own businesses in Missouri. Prior to moving to Pennsylvania, I also spent time in executive level financial roles and operational roles in companies such as Treehouse Foods and also Nestle. I'm fully opposed to this bill. And number one, I fully support the comments that the other two gentlemen made. Those were actually on my list. One thing I want to point out, we talk about, what can we cut? It looks like from 2014 to what is proposed for this year, the general fund is about 80% more than what it was, about 60% more than what it was in 2019. So my question is, what do we need to cut? Well, how does the general fund increase so much more versus inflation over that period of time? So it seems like we do have a lot of opportunity to cut. I will say, in this committee, you guys did a very good job spending money. So congratulations on that. But that also leads me to believe that, Maryland doesn't necessarily have a revenue problem. It has a spending problem. And I think if you look at over time and the right decisions for businesses, for individuals, and also for children, it's to cut spending and try to be more business friendly, because everyone knows if you have small business in society that's successful, that creates better livelihoods. That creates better opportunities for the children. So I think that we should be looking at this from a little different angle and getting our hands around our spending. A couple of points that I would also add, Maryland is the 10th highest cost push to commercial properties. It's also the 10th highest per capita burden for state and local taxes on individuals. So again, it seems we have a spending problem in the state. We have an opportunity to change the direction on that.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. Lisa May with Maryland Realtors. Maryland has a housing shortage of 150,000 units, and it grows each and every year. It's been a priority of Maryland Realtors and of this administration to begin to address our housing crisis. But this bill stands in direct opposition to that goal. Constructing the new housing that we desperately need relies on the use of many professional trades and services. Buying that home, once it is completed, relies on the use of many professional trades and services. Maintaining the homes once they are purchased or once they are rented relies on the use of professional trades and services. Under this bill, we are taxing each and every one of those services, each and every one of those trades, each and every part of home ownership. It's going to add thousands and thousands to the cost of buying and owning a home. That's assuming, of course, that it doesn't derail new housing construction altogether when it no longer pencils out. Right now, Maryland is 43rd in the nation in terms of housing affordability. And over 80% of our residents say that the cost to purchase a home is too high, the cost to rent a home is too high, and the cost to construct a home is too high. Are we going to tell them that they're wrong? That not only is it not too high right now, but it needs to be higher in the future? We hope that we are all here and are all serious about addressing our housing crisis. And if we are, then the only answer is to vote no on House Bill 1515. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Giovanni Hawkins. I'm the Executive Director of the Maryland Society of Accounting and Tax Professionals. We represent over 2,000 tax and accounting members. Many of them are small businesses in our state. Our members serve over 700,000 Maryland residents. The Maryland Society of Accounting and Tax Professionals opposes House Bill 1515 due to the significant challenges and burdens it would impose on small businesses and accountants across the state. While we appreciate the intent to modernize Maryland's sales tax structure, we believe the proposed changes will create more problems than solutions. Our primary concern is the dramatic expansion of sales tax base to include a wide range of services, including tax preparation. Many of our members work with small business clients who provide these services, and we know firsthand the administrative complexities and costs associated with sales tax compliance. Also, enforcing businesses to start charging, collecting, and remitting sales tax suddenly will require updates to invoicing, accounting systems, staff training, and ongoing management of exemptions and filing requirements. For those businesses that seek professional counsel on compliance with their own sales tax filings, having to pay sales tax in order to calculate their sales tax is unfair and unethical. The state should not prejudice a taxpayer for seeking out professional counsel. And this is similar to the argument of legal services being taxed. Furthermore, the addition of sales tax will make these services much more expensive for consumers, which could negatively impact demand and hurt the small businesses that this bill aims to support. In conclusion, MSATP believes House Bill 1515 will create significant hardships for small service businesses and their clients, as well as the accountants in the state, outweighing the potential benefit of the sales tax rate reduction. We respectfully request an unfavorable report on this bill. Thank you.
Delegate Griffith.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all for showing up today and speaking on such short notice. This question is from Ms. May. So speaking about housing stock and the significant negative impacts on housing, obviously, I've always been taught that home ownership is not only the American dream, but it's also the mechanism to generational wealth. And it's well documented. We have a huge housing shortage here, slowdowns there. And this will, again, to your point, will not only impact, the cost of a new home, or any home, but also cost to maintain that home, which will ultimately price folks out. Can you speak to the ripple effects of this bill, if passed as introduced, not only on housing, but on workforce housing, on the fact that we won't have enough homes for people to live in, which will drive large businesses away and ultimately impact our economy negatively down the road through all other aspects?
Sure. Thank you for the question, Delegate. It's quite a big one. So I'll try to address.
It's a big bill.
It is. Right now we're constructing homes at the 8th slowest pace in the nation. And each home sale, each home constructed has broader economic spin-off effects. Our national association places that each home sale puts $125,000 of economic activity into the economy through all of the services that go into that process. Movers, electricians, installers, every single part that goes into this is by and large a professional service or a professional trade. And so we really do see this compounding. I'm sure that our friends in the building industry have some real specifics on this, but at a $400,000 median home price, anywhere from, $8,000, $10,000, $12,000 to the price of a home being added because of this bill is not unreasonable at all.
Thank you.
Delegate Hartman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I guess it's pick on Lisa May Day. So my question is in the same line. And you just commented $8,000 to $10,000. I was going to question that number. What's the median cost of a new home today in Maryland?
So I don't have the cost of a new home. Typically, those are higher than the median home price that I cited is all homes, resale homes. So a new home would be by and large higher than that.
So the $8,000 to $10,000 you mentioned, I'm looking at the list and thinking, when you first off you buy a lot, so you're paying a real estate commission on that purchase. Then you're getting an architect, you're paying fees, taxes on that. Then you're getting a title search, I guess, even, to settle, you're going to be paying on that. The lawyer's going to be involved for the settlement, you're paying there again. Now you start clearing the lot, tree removal, tree service are being taxed. Then we need an appraisal to get the, based on the architectural rendering so that we can get financing to start construction. So we're going to be taxing the appraisal service. And then you have the plumbing and all the other trades. Then we have to do exterminating to make sure what you're building is not going to be destroyed by termites. I don't know if I've covered it all yet. So is $8,000 to $10,000 accurate? I question that, and then to hear you say it, when you think of how long that list gets with all the soft costs before, is $8,000 to $10,000 really accurate? Because I would think a new home today in Maryland would be anywhere from $350,000 up.
I think that's a conservative estimate.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you all very much. Next, Jordan Rosner, Lori Graff, Kaylee Locklear, Kirk McCulley, and Edward Riley. Oh, former Senator Riley, welcome.
Oh, right. On the left. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee, Ed Riley. I'm here as a consumer and a small business owner. From my consumer standpoint, we have been severely adversely impacted over the past 3 years just due to inflation. Now, inflation has actually slowed down, but it's not retreated. So we're paying inflated prices for all the products and services we've been using this past period of time. Small businesses have to increase minimum wage Again, forcing businesses to increase the costs they send to us consumers. You know, the gas tax we passed is a hidden gas tax. When the tax goes up, it's not recorded individually at the pump. But we all know there's an increase in the gas tax. And thank you for reminding us about the paid leave insurance cost that is coming to small businesses. All these things are focused on the cost of doing business and services. I have to tell you that I believe there are 17 counties in the state of Maryland which are adjacent to our neighbors. And it's not that difficult a job to drive 15 or 20 miles to get car repairs, to get services that are included in this bill outside the state. And I'm saying to you today, that's happening today. I own a little vacation home in Delaware. When I need things done, I do it in Delaware, no sales tax. But this is happening across the state. And I would offer to you folks that it is part of the reason for the declining cost. With this bill passes, there'll be lower job creation. And don't forget the local government pressure to increase fees to cover their share of the blueprint. All these things are going to be inflating our cost of doing business to our consumers, to our small businesses. And the bill's not appropriate at this time. Madam Vice Chair, if I may take leave and ask those who are opposing this bill to please stand at this time. Not all of them are testifying. May I do that? Anybody here against the bill? Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you for your time and the opportunity to speak. My name is Jordan Rosner. I represent the Mid-Atlantic Car Wash Association, which represents car wash owners in the state of Maryland. I also am a small business owner that owns several small car washes that I run and operate. Increasing the customer cost to run to wash his car professionally is bad for the environment. One of the reasons that's overlooked is that the wastewater in our facilities is treated before it enters into the sanitary sewer system. Forcing car wash customers to pay more for a car wash would discourage patronage and encourage driveway washing. Wastewater from driveway washing runs into the storm sewer untreated and into the streams and rivers and then into the Chesapeake Bay. This is a bad public policy and will cost the state of Maryland more to clean up in the long run. The second issue, and I'll be brief, is that this is basically going to be a tax on car wash owners because our equipment is set up to collect taxes. It's automated, often it's unattended businesses that are open 24 hours, 7 days a week. We will not be able to update our equipment. So essentially the car wash operator and owner will be paying out of their gross revenues the tax. It will not be the end user, it'll be the car wash owner. So it's an additional 5% tax on these small businesses. Lastly, it was mentioned earlier that small business to business transactions may be exempt. In addition, the other people who are exempt are state organizations. I can tell you firsthand, my operations service individuals, service businesses and business to business operation, and also state operators. Just this past weekend, I had a park ranger who was washing his truck ask me if my equipment charges sales tax because he would not be reimbursed for that portion of the cost. And he said to me, do you charge sales tax? If you do, I can't wash the car and pay for it through my credit card because I will not be reimbursed for it. We do not charge sales tax. He was able to do it. I respectfully ask that you consider these options and either exempt the car washes in the state of Maryland from this, or ideally not pass this bill. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Lori Graff. I'm the CEO of the Maryland Building Industry Association. We represent over 100,000 business people that build houses. You guys have talked a lot about housing. I'm not going to reiterate the information about the housing shortage. We have spent a lot of time in the Environment and Transportation Committee this year trying to figure out how to build more housing. We need more housing. The only way to make housing more affordable and more attainable for Marylanders is to build more housing. So we have been working very hard on that. To answer the question about the median sales price, $411,000 is the median price of a house in Maryland. Obviously, it really depends on where you are in the state, but that is, and I do think the $10,000 is conservative. We were trying to be somewhat conservative when we kind of came up with our numbers, and it really depends on the size of the house, where the house is, and those types of things. Our National Association has a number that says for every $1,000 increase in the price of a house, 2,842 Marylanders will be priced out of the market. So if you did use that $10,000 number, that equates to almost 29,000 people not being able to afford a house any longer in the state of Maryland. It's very concerning to us. We would ask that you give this report an unfavorable report. Thank you.
Madam Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee, my name is Kurt McCauley. I represent service stations, convenience stores, and automobile repair shops in Maryland. This bill is going to hurt all business, but particularly small business who have to use professional service from the outside. They don't have them on staff, especially my service stations that have to follow regulations of MD and have inspections twice a year. We also have inspections from the comptroller's office. All of these would require a tax on that service on small business. But particularly my auto repair shops and Big Ed, he testified on automobile repair, and that's one of the things that's mobile. When you go to get your car fixed, 99% of the time you drive to the shop. Well, if you're within 10 miles of a border and you're going to get a major repair, you're going to drive across and get that repair done somewhere where you're not going to pay them extra fees. That's an option there. You can do that. It's not like getting an electrician to come to your home or labor. That's bad, but at least you know it's going to get done in the state. When you drive out of state, it doesn't. So all of these things that hurt businesses, and the bottom line is all of this goes downhill. Business is going to have to increase their costs. Consumers going to end up paying for every bit of this bill. Your constituents are going to pay for every penny this bill does. Businesses can't afford to hold it. And me too, and the rest of the stuff. And thank you. And we request an unfavorable report. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Vice Chair and honorable members of the committee. For the record, Kaylee Locklear here on behalf of the Maryland Retailers Alliance. We are in opposition to this bill. And I'll just start by saying that our association is always supportive of reducing or eliminating the sales tax as sales do increase, but we are here in opposition to the sales tax expansion. The expansion of services that would now be subject to the sales tax would not only be drastically felt by consumers, but obviously businesses as well. And, you know, I first like to caution the committee about something no one else has brought up. There are potential double taxation policy or possibilities in here. So for example, delivery services and a tax bill went to E&T. And they are considering that bill right now, and that's actually covered in this bill as well. So that's something that I just wanted to flag for all of you. I'd also point you to the fiscal note, and you've heard a lot from folks about us being a border state. Definitely means that people are going to travel across borders for services. That's not surprising. But I think even worse is we represent designated main streets in the state of Maryland. So some of our PR folks came to us and talked about how they are just flat out put at a competitive disadvantage because you can go to any state that has a PR firm and automatically PR services are going to cost more. And I finally just want to echo the comments that my colleague Mike O'Halloran made from the National Federation of Independent Businesses. Businesses have absorbed so many costs in the past couple of years, and we just cannot continue to layer on the backs of businesses. So we urge an unfavorable report, and I'm glad to answer any questions the committee has. Thank you.
Thank you so much to this panel. I don't see any questions from my colleagues, but I do have a question of my own for the gentleman that is with the car washes. Thank you so much. I actually do have 2 car washes, maybe more in my district. And I didn't quite understand what you were saying about the connection between the water runoff and this tax bill. That's one thing. And I also didn't understand the challenge with implementing a tax in that area. So if, for example, if a basic car wash is $20. Now it's $20 plus a 5% tax. So I wasn't understanding also what that challenge is, even if it's 24-hour unmanned.
Thank you very much. So briefly, the environmental issue is the fact that all the water in our car wash goes into a pit and it gets separated out. And before it gets sent to the sewer system, it's treated. So discouraging people from because of the higher cost of a car wash from washing at a car wash and maybe washing in their driveway, they are then going to have the runoff from their driveway go into the local sewer system untreated. Whereas if they came to our car wash, everything that comes off their car, whether it's oil or whatever, it gets treated before it gets sent into the sewer system. And for that reason alone, it'll be environmentally more friendly for someone to wash at a car wash than in their driveway. With respect to the car washes, many of the car washes in this state are what they call self-serve. They either you could wash the car yourself or it's an automated system that's controlled by computers and it's open 24 hours, 7 days a week. The equipment's very basic. We charge in increments of 25 cents because the coin acceptor only accepts quarters. We charge in whole numbers. We can't, the equipment can't process a 5 or 6% tax on top of whatever we charge and accept money and make change. We do not make change in our equipment because we are basically, it's like a coin operated laundry machine. It just accepts quarters and it doesn't make change. And the equipment's just not designed and never been designed to accept fees. We don't even pass on credit card fees to our customers because we just eat them as a cost of doing business because our equipment is not designed to be able to add a fee or anything like that, whether it's a credit card fee or a sales tax fee. And for that reason alone, basically me as the small business operator, I'm going to be paying it out of my gross receipts as opposed to being able to pay it out of, I suppose, eventually out of income tax because it'll be going towards employees or whatever.
Thank you. I appreciate the further detail. Delegate Long.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I kind of understand what you're saying. Like if I personally wash my car in a car wash and I can do it quickly at $1.50 and someone else comes in and spends $3, you have no way of really taxing the amount of money they spend. Am I correct?
That's
Am I
correct.
thinking?
That's correct.
And don't you, I'm just curious, you say you discharge your water in the sanitary sewer. Don't they charge you for that also?
We pay very high sewer and water fees, higher than the average consumer. That's correct.
And water also, if I'm not mistaken?
We have a water fee that's a component and it's almost a 2x times for the sewer. We pay actually more for sewer than we pay for water.
Well, thank you.
Well, thank you so much to this panel. We appreciate your time. We'll now move forward with calling the next panel. Steve Rinaldi, Frank Gonzalez, Kelly Hughes Iverson, and Bruce Plaxton.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to testify today, Madam Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Steve Rinaldi, and I'm a business attorney. I represent the business law section of the Maryland State Bar Association. And in my section, we are completely unfavorable as to this bill. This bill completely deters small businesses from accessing legal services that they need just to survive. If you got a situation where I've got to impose a additional 5% sales tax, a client may not seek out my services for securities offering, run the risk of just not complying, and then having to pay astronomical fines to the state securities agency and the SEC. A client purchasing a business may run the risk of not doing adequate due diligence or getting protections in that purchase agreement, and as a result, being stuck with a business that is extremely unprofitable and is going to close. A client leasing retail or restaurant space may not seek out legal services, be stuck with an extremely unfavorable lease that renders that business unprofitable, And ladies and gentlemen, when that business is unprofitable in that situation, and they don't have a lawyer to review it, they have to pay damages for the entire amount of that full lease, even if the landlord leases it to somebody else. Client may not seek out an attorney to do franchise, to provide proper services in franchising. And as a result, have to pay thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars of fines to the Maryland Attorney General's office. This is also renders the Maryland lawyers very uncompetitive. I'm a member of the DC bar as well. I could locate my office 2 miles away in DC and with non-Maryland clients not have to collect this tax. It's going to tell a lot of attorneys, just move out of the state and you don't have to collect the tax with a non-Maryland person. Thank you.
And actually, before you begin, it looks like we have one person that is not present. So Amy Rohrer, you're the next person on the list. So please come on up. Thank you. You can proceed now.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to testify. My name is Kelly Hughes Iverson. I am here on behalf of the Maryland State Bar Association, which represents 42,000 lawyers and judges across the state of Maryland. I am a co-chair of the Committee on Laws for the MSBA. The MSBA stands in strong opposition to the proposal to tax legal services and urges this committee to issue an unfavorable report on HB 1515. We understand that the state is facing a funding crunch this year, but I would urge the legislature not to create long-term problems to address a nervous eye toward the state budget. It's important not to be penny wise, but pound foolish. Delegate Roberts had earlier asked about other states' experiences. I would point you toward, I believe, Massachusetts and Florida attempted briefly and soon realized what a bad idea it would be to tax legal services. We've been talking about consumption taxes. We've been hearing about things like pet grooming and spa services. Legal services are not spa services. The long-term problems here will be bad for clients, bad for business, and because of the unique nature of legal services, create an administrative quagmire. This is not a tax on luxury goods or services that are purely elective. These are people that would never soon just as not be entangled in the legal system, but the legal system comes in and grabs them. Things like divorce, child support, some of the same children that you're trying to assist with the blueprint, these child support issues, housing, evictions, elder protection, debt collections, to name a few. The individuals need legal services at some of the most vulnerable periods of their lives. I would urge the committee to refer to a task force on affordable law published report by the MSBA and the A2J. And I would ask that there be an unfavorable report on HB 1515. Thank you.
Esteemed committee members, my name is Frank Gonzalez, and I am here as the Council President of Easton, Maryland. This legislation represents a pivotal opportunity to shape Maryland's fiscal future in a way that benefits all its residents. Firstly, I extend my sincere commendations to this committee for proposing to lower the sales tax rate. This initiative is a testament to our shared dedication to reducing the financial load on Maryland citizens and energizing our economy. Such a strategic move is paramount for bolstering consumer expenditure and aiding the expansion of businesses statewide. However, I approach the aspect of expanding the taxable services base with a message of cautious optimism. This proposal, aimed at offsetting the reduction in sales tax revenue, necessitates a careful deliberation of its wider repercussions. It is crucial that we navigate this terrain by striking a balance that does not inadvertently place a strain on small businesses, the cornerstone of our economy, nor restrict access to indispensable services for society's most vulnerable members. Our collective endeavor to enhance local economies and safeguard the well-being of our citizens must be guided by a commitment to fostering an environment conducive to growth, innovation, and fairness. In this spirit, I advocate for a collaborative effort involving comprehensive discussions with stakeholders from every sector and a meticulous analysis of the economic impacts entailed by this proposal. By exploring viable alternatives and innovative solutions, we can advance Maryland's fiscal health without imposing excessive burdens. Thank you for your considering my perspective on this critical matter and for the opportunity to contribute to this vital discourse. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Bruce Plaxton for the Maryland Association for Justice. I'm experienced at coming down to testify on behalf of trial lawyers, but not generally in your committee. Thank you for the opportunity. Legal services are unique in that the right to an attorney is protected in the Constitution. States around the country, including the American Bar Association, are long studying the need to increase access to legal care. They recognize that there's a crisis that people cannot afford legal care and the necessary legal care. And as it was pointed out by our state bar, this is not a luxury service that someone chooses to get involved in, whether it's divorce or a criminal matter or terrific catastrophe caused by a car accident or some other type of negligence. A lawyer is necessary to navigate that. In addition, there are unique considerations in legal care. We have attorney-client privileges. It may not even be possible to tell you who we represent or someone to indicate they shouldn't have to tell that they even have an attorney for a certain matter. And it's often difficult, as has been pointed out by previous people who've testified, to determine where you even practice. In other words, I take legal matters for Marylanders that are actually for legal matters that are occurring outside of Maryland. And I actually represent people from other states who will come to Maryland and are involved in a car accident, but they live out of state. And is the service that I'm providing a Maryland service, or are we doing a DC service? Class action cases, we represent many people from many different jurisdictions. And quite honestly, the quagmire of trying to collect taxes for legal services just is an unworkable situation. We should be making it easier for people to get legal services and not harder. And the Maryland Association for Justice would ask for an unfavorable report on this bill.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, good afternoon. My name is Amy Rohrer, here on behalf of the Maryland Hotel Lodging Association. Our industry is highly competitive, and our customers are already taxed at a higher rate than most businesses, since they pay sales tax to the state and room taxes to the counties. County room taxes vary, so guests are paying anywhere from 10% to 15.5% on hotel rooms throughout the state. This bill would add taxes to our normal business activities for services such as plumbers, electricians, elevator maintenance and repair, landscaping, accountings, legal, staffing. A tax on services such as these and others would no doubt be difficult for a hotel to absorb, but I have yet to mention what we believe the biggest impact on our industry would be if this bill were to pass, and that is a tax on management services. Hotels of all types, from large full-service hotels to smaller economy brands, typically contract with management companies to handle day-to-day operations. Their services may include general management, revenue management, sales and marketing, purchasing and acquisitions, and so on. Each property pays a fee to their management company, typically calculated as a percentage of gross revenue, ranging from 3 to 5%. We believe this bill would impose an additional 5% on whatever percentage the management company charges. Margins are slim, and this would be a direct and significant hit to the profitability of a hotel. According to the Maryland Tourism Development Board annual report, visitor spending helped to generate more than $2.3 billion in state and local tax revenues in 2023. I'd like to caution you, as we believe that any additional taxes on our industry would lessen our competitiveness as a destination, which would have a trickle-down effect on Maryland's economy and would hurt every hotel in the state. We urge an unfavorable report. Thank you.
Thank you so much to this panel for your testimony. Delegate Buckle.
Madam Chair, I just had a couple questions for my fellow lawyers. We were all dumb enough to go to law school. So to Ms. Iverson, you talked about states that have imposed a sales tax on legal services. My research indicates there might only be 2 states that do that. Do you know? Looks like South Dakota, but their rate is 4%, and Hawaii, which I'd pay whatever taxes I had to if I could afford to go live in Hawaii. It seems lovely. But
I believe New Mexico may also be one, but those are the only three that I was aware of. Hawaii, for example, is very different from Maryland for lots of reasons, but one of them is that you're not surrounded by jurisdictions like the District of
Competitors.
Columbia. Exactly.
Right. You'd have to sail to Japan or California in order to get your, your car service.
That's
That
right.
wouldn't work. And my question for Mr. Plaxton, how would you even impose a 5% sales tax on a contingency fee? So I think the drafters of this bill and a lot of people just base these numbers on, what do lawyers bill? I do a little bit of both. Sometimes I bill somebody by the hour and I can tell you what I'm going to get. Sometimes, like you, I do things for contingency. I have no idea what my success rate will be or what the ultimate. Would they just tax your fees? If you settled a case for $100,000, someone's been moderately to seriously injured, let's just say a $33,000 and change fee. Would it be a 5% tax on that? And then would you have to pass that along to the client, or would they tax the entire settlement, which would be taking the money out of the innocent person's pocket?
My assumption in reading the bill and reading, my limited knowledge of tax laws, it's a tax on the fee. So of the $100,000, if there's $30,000 go to doctors and court costs, and then my fee is $33,000, and the client is charged another 5%, which is about another $2,000, it's a significant piece of what their net is.
Right, and that fee,
Yeah.
you're just taking that tax out of their end, because you're already paying income tax on your end, so it would be double taxation if it wasn't taken out of their net recovery.
Correct.
So we're taxing them. And then my last question to the panel of lawyers. I don't know if you were in the room and you heard the bill sponsor said, I want to eliminate the business to business perception of this, the business to business part, which I would take. I'm not positive. I'm not sure he was positive what that really meant. But that to me would create a dichotomy where if I'm an incorporated entity, I'm an LLC, and I go to hire a lawyer to do something for me, I don't have to pay the sales tax. But if I'm just an individual and I go to hire a lawyer to do the same thing, I have to pay the sales tax. And it also would mean I have to pay sales tax on getting a lawyer to fight over child custody. Or, my child, I think one of you mentioned, sometimes people are thrust into the legal system without they're not a willing participant, but they're required to participate in it. And they would pay a 5% tax on all of those services, but a business wouldn't. If Google hired an IP firm in Baltimore to handle millions of dollars worth of work for them, they don't pay the sales tax. But if Joe Blow from Cambridge, who's unincorporated, hires someone to draft a contract for him, he's paying the sales tax. Would that be your impression of how it would work out?
That's my understanding. And in my mind, when I looked at this, it seems that legal services is a particularly regressive part of the tax. In other words, that Wall Street firms, businesses won't pay it, but your constituents who have small legal matters getting sued in small claims court, getting sued, over small matters or neighbor disputes, they're all going to pay sales tax on this.
It's very logical. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Griffith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you all for being here. My first question is about hotels. And I think we all agree that, low income families deserve the right to be able to go on vacation occasionally, have the right to visit family in other states if they come out of town to Maryland, deserve to have a place to sleep if they're traveling through Maryland. Do you have a sense of what this tax would do to, more specifically to hotel rates?
Hotel rates have already increased, just trying to keep up with inflation. And so, we don't feel that we can necessarily increase rates enough to account for all of the different taxes we would experience as a result of this. But I have to say it's likely that rates may be increased to the extent that they're able to do so. We also have to compete with other destinations. And so we're sensitive to rate increases.
And this may also impact county's ability to raise hotel taxes because so much of it's been eaten up by this bill, correct?
Correct. And as you raise taxes on hotels, so at the county level, the room tax, as that is raised, it is really important to also put money into sales and marketing of the destination, again, to account for the increased rates that is going to have our guests experiencing.
Absolutely. And my next question is for just one individual in the panel, whoever it is fine. And I'm probably going to ask this in a future panel. So we know as business people that this gets largely, if not entirely, passed on to consumers. It was alleged earlier that, people are here just because it affects your business, but really this affects consumers. So I guess if this is being passed on anyway, why are you here? If it's just for your own interest.
If it's being passed on anyway, people do not access legal services. And in my area of the law, those consequences of not accessing legal services can be catastrophic. You can lose your house. You can lose your child's college savings if you want to seek investors from your business and you do not give them a private placement memorandum or file Form D. You owe thousands of dollars in fines to the state, and those are non-dischargeable in bankruptcy. You have to pay whether you have the money or not. The same in the franchise area. If you're a small business and you're negotiating a commercial lease against Federal Realty's first draft in that lease always says, if you default, you owe the entire lease term. We have the right to lease to anybody else who we want and keep that money as well. Now, if you access a lawyer, most attorneys are able to get a carve out saying, stop the damages the moment you bring somebody else in. People get to keep their homes. People get to keep their kids' college education. Consequences of not using the services of a business attorney in a business transaction can be utterly apocalyptic.
So I guess my question is, these concerns aren't just about your business. These concerns are about your consumers, correct?
It's about my clients. Yes, and in fact, my clients are, most of them have gross revenues less than $1 million. And even though I'm a business attorney, 60% of my clients are either first generation Americans, or they are minorities, or they are women.
Thank you.
It's Delegate. It's an access to justice issue. It is one of the strong cornerstones of the MSBA. Also is that access to justice to help low-income individuals. A report by the Legal Services Corporation in 2022 found that the striking 75% of low-income Americans who fell below the federal poverty line faced at least one civil legal problem in the prior year, and 92% of them had no or insufficient legal help. And the studies have shown, as my colleague has done, that just having a lawyer will really help level the playing field. It is access to justice.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks so much to this panel. We'll now call up our next panel of witnesses: Liz League, Ashley Reed, Stephanie Heege, Bob Enton, and Andrew Griffin.
Testing. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and committee members. My name is Liz League, and I'm the CEO of the Greater Severna Park and Arnold Chamber of Commerce. We are a membership organization supporting businesses and nonprofits since 1957. I'm here today to represent over 600 businesses with thousands of employees in opposition to HB 1515. On behalf of my members and the community, we strongly oppose HB 1515, not just this year, but for all time. In spite of the fact that Maryland is in the top 10 as one of the least business-friendly states, our small businesses continue to take on the challenge to live the American dream, to be their own bosses in the communities that they love. And they continue to be targeted with higher taxes and fees. HB 1515 may be the nail in the coffin for many of our businesses. Small businesses will now be taxed for accounting and legal services, shipping and delivery services, cleaning, advertising, printing, packaging, computer repair, bookkeeping, basically everything under the sun. And they will have no choice but to raise their prices to cover the high costs of doing business. And unlike the common perception, small business owners are not millionaires, not even close. and they pay their bills first before they pay anyone else. Raising their own rates will most definitely result in a loss of business, and then we will lose our businesses. Losing our businesses results in lost jobs, lost goods and services, lost support of our nonprofits, which then leads to the loss of stable communities. Then you have, wow, that was fast. Then you
Yes,
have
please wrap up.
unemployment, crime, and overall desolation. So we are in strong opposition to HB 1515.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Andrew Griffin here on behalf of the Maryland Chamber of Commerce. House Bill 1515 is, it's a $3 billion tax on the economy. You've heard the problems. It disproportionately impacts small businesses who purchase more services than businesses of larger size. There are administration issues determining where a service exists, where it's supplied, which we've seen in other states who have done something similar. There's pyramiding issues. To put this in context that was being discussed a little bit earlier, this committee is charged with finding revenue to pay for long-term investment, whatever that investment is that you all decide to make it. You cannot put a $3 billion tax on the economy that impacts consumers and businesses, of which we're struggling to create jobs. You just got a briefing on it. Our year-to-year job creation rate is about 1%, puts us 40th in the country. We're struggling to get people back to work. We lead the nation in workers sitting on the sidelines. You cannot take $3 billion out of the economy and think you're going to see job investment, business investment, job creation out of that. You're not going to get a long-term investment out of a regressive tax for the overall economy. That I'll just urge an unfavorable report. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the committee, Robert Enton, and I'm appearing before you today on behalf of two clients, the Maryland Bankers Association and the Maryland Building Industry Association. You've already heard from Ms. Graff for the Maryland Builders. And I would just emphasize, the facts that she gave you. This is clearly a pass through to small business. It's a pass through to consumers. And when I think about housing, and I look at if you ask, I think most people, what are the top 5 legislative priorities in the General Assembly this year? Clearly, affordable housing is one of the top issues that we face and that we're focused on. And I think that the impact on affordable housing of this legislation is going to be quite significant, and every dollar of those costs is going to be passed on to people that are trying to afford to buy a home. For the Maryland Bankers Association, let me just say that we have our banks operate 1,200 branches all over the state of Maryland, from the largest banks like, say, Bank of America, to the smaller banks like maybe Bank of Glen Burnie. They're in your districts. They have branches there. They employ 26,000 Maryland citizens. And clearly, the cost of this for them is also going to be passed on to consumers. The numbers that we're talking about, when I look at the fiscal note, the numbers are really quite off the chart. We're talking about billions of dollars. And trust me, every dollar of that in some fashion is going to be passed on to Maryland consumers. So for those reasons, for both of my clients, we would urge the committee to give this bill an unfavorable report. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee. I am Stephanie Hagee. I represent small business. My husband and I own John Hagee Remodeling, Restoration, and Construction. We are in opposition of this bill for a multitude of reasons. Our customer is the homeowner. This bill would directly affect the homeowner. It goes straight to their bottom line in a time that's already been devastating. As an employer of small business, we employ about 20 to 25 laborers. Our business is construction materials and construction labor. As many have commented about the adjacent towns, my staff work in Pennsylvania, Delaware, DC. That's where they live. They're no longer going to come to work in the state of Maryland, working for a state of Maryland small business, when they can go to the adjacent states and make more money and not pay the taxes. administering such a tax like this in a small business. We are 20 to 25 people. My husband and I own the business. I am HR, IT, bookkeeping, CFO, you name it, right? You deploy this tax and I have to figure out how to pay it. When do I pay it? I have homeowners across the line in Pennsylvania. How does my labor get attached to those people? I have 20 subcontractors that all work in the trades. That means plumbers, electricians, drywall hangers, everything. How do I add a tax to them and when do I add it? What if that labor lives in Pennsylvania? Do I do it? The administration of a tax like this is unwieldy. It is devastating to a small business. And in the construction industry, we are already devastated. In the last 4 years, construction materials have gone up on average 41%. That gets passed on to the consumer. You want a kitchen remodeled? Your materials are 41% higher than they were. Thank you. We are in opposition. Yes, sorry. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Pat McElroy. I work with my brother, Tim Bonner, at Tim's Automotive and Towing.
I'm sorry, Miss Pat. I think you're actually on the next panel.
Oh,
but
okay.
Since you are there, you can go ahead. But if everyone can just wait until I call their name.
Okay. We met with I met with our towing guys, and we have towing customers that complain all the time about accidents. And you have to bring Maryland State Police into this discussion. Accident fees could go up thousands. Recoveries. Really challenging on small business. The administrative costs for some. I actually talked to an accountant who does my stuff, and he hated the idea that he could charge Maryland sales tax. If not, help residents in the city and counties. I'm really against charging it for towing. Auto mechanics, the labor, it goes good. Transportation, towing, and parking. There's different types of tows. There's accident towing, and then there's regular towing. Okay. And there's police initiated towing too. And there's rates set for police initiated towing. So you would have to get the state police involved in this, and the Department of Transportation. Okay. All right.
Thank you so much to this panel. I don't see any questions, so this panel is dismissed. Thank you. Is Ashley Reed here? All right, we'll move into the next panel of witnesses. Tom Ballantyne, Jennifer Rios, Philip Savard, Sean Larkin, and Chris Costello. Okay, it looks like we have another spot. So Rebecca Snyder, if you're here. And Rebecca, you can start us off. Thank you.
Good afternoon, committee. My name is Rebecca Snyder. I'm the executive director of the Maryland, Delaware, DC Press Association. And excuse me, We oppose House Bill 1515. Basically because this would tax advertising and agency services. So news media depends greatly on advertising to fund news gathering operations. And this bill within the advertising space would essentially trickle down to consumers. And so when advertising is, I guess, an optional business expense, but what happens when that service is taxed, it's not that the budget just goes up magically. Those dollars come out of the advertising. And so that has a material effect, not only on news media, which is already in a pickle, shall we say, but it also has an effect on those small businesses, on all those businesses. Without advertising, they're limited in the amount of the new products that they can advertise, getting their message out. And so it will actually choke the economic engine. Advertising supports about 22% of all the jobs in Maryland, and it drives about 136 billion with a B in economic activity in the state. And we feel like if the goal is to raise revenues for everyone, the state and business, you don't want to have something that's going to throttle that activity. We also have concerns about the constitutionality of advertising taxes. There's well-established precedent in a case, Baltimore City versus Able in 1958, that says taxes on advertising taxes speech. So we urge you to carve out advertising taxes and business taxes in general. And we ask for an unfavorable report. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Vice Chair and honorable members of the committee. My name is Jennifer Rios, and I'm the president of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce of Prince George's County, and I'm here to represent Latino businesses. Our chamber opposes House Bill 1515 due to its potential detrimental effects on the business community. We believe that this proposed legislation would have a tremendous negative impact on our business community and long-term negative consequences for our local economy. While the bill aims to lower the sales taxes from 6% to 5%, it expands the tax previously untaxed services like legal, accounting, home improvements, janitorial, gym memberships, and auto services that have never been taxed before. This would have a significant impact on our members. A large portion of them provide services in these industries. In 2007, the number of Hispanic businesses in Maryland grew from 25,000 to more than 100,000 in 2024, and yet to recover from the pandemic. Since 2007, Maryland has seen a significant growth in Hispanic-owned businesses, particularly in Prince George's County, which has the second largest number of such businesses. Enforcing a 5% increase in the cost of small business is an unfair burden that could very well cause small business owners to close their doors or move to neighboring states that don't have similar taxes on professional services or loss to their clients. The Hispanic Chamber of Commerce of Prince George's County supports Maryland Hispanic small businesses, which employs over 3 million people in the state. We will continue to fight for economy security against the burdensome legislation. We Latino small businesses oppose House Bill 15 and request an unfavorable report on the bill. Thank you.
Madam Chair, distinguished committee members, those who have stuck around for this, thank you for your valuable time. I'm Philip Savard, a private citizen and a small business owner. It seems like the drafters and supporters of this bill genuinely care about education and the environment. It seems that they care so much that they are willing to increase the tax burden by over $3 billion. Is it unreasonable to feel distrust when a bill that increases the tax burden is cloaked with a deceptive title, misleading the public with the word reduction? Is it unreasonable to question their knowledge on how an economy will respond to this burden? Is it wise to go to a lawyer to have them perform your heart surgery? To go to a surgeon to have them do your accounting? Is it unreasonable to question whether they have consulted experts in economy on this bill? And if consulted, what is the quality and skill of these experts? Are all doctors great doctors? Are all individuals with a Juris Doctorate great lawyers? Is it not wise to look beyond credentials and to look for consistent results? Results. What will the results of passing this bill be? Will a kind heart and good intentions make seeds sown on rocky soil yield a bountiful harvest? Can the laws and fundamental principles that govern reality be changed by mere good intentions? I have friends and relatives that have already left the great state of Maryland. In fact, my own daughter has left, and she said, "Dad, sell your business, sell your home, and get out before it gets bad." How many others have contemplated this decision? How many other small business owners will think about closing their shop and leaving? Should this bill pass, this half-baked cake, this burden to the economy, should this pass, what are the unintended consequences? I am not in favor of this.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Vice Chair and the panel. My name is Sean Larkin, owner of a small business, and I'm a consumer here in the state of Maryland. Here today to testify on behalf and would respectfully oppose the Bill 15 on the sales tax. I believe it's regressive. In my business, I see it as a long-term domino effect, meaning that in my business, I own a car wash. With all the services that we provide and the services that come into us to help us run our business, such as cleaning our tanks, the deliveries that come in, our professional services, and all the other services come in, all the domino effects of this tax that goes down is all going to be burned on to the businesses, which ultimately is going to be passed on to our consumers, which I feel as though, as a consumer, that is very unwise. It pushes consumers to driveway washing, which I know you've already heard about, but it's bad for the environment and harmful for the Chesapeake Bay. So I'm also opposed to this bill 1550.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the Ways and Means Committee. My name is Chris Costello. I'm here representing the Howard County Chamber of Commerce, and I'm going to avoid trying to repeat a lot of what everybody else has said. Certainly endorse what the Maryland Chamber said and what the other people have said in opposition to this bill. I'm just going to jump right to the primary reason that the Howard County Chamber has chosen to oppose this bill, and that is the fact that, as you know, sales tax is the most regressive bill we have. And one of the things that this bill, $3 billion or whatever, is going to have is that it's going to substantially increase the cost of living in the state of Maryland, which is already 7th highest in the nation, according to Forbes Advisor. And that really plays havoc on the economic conditions in Howard County, because affordable housing is a big issue for the chamber, trying to find affordable housing for the people who work for the businesses in Howard County. And of course, trying to find a way to balance wages for people who work there. This is going to have a substantial adverse effect on that process. You've seen where everybody's trying to increase the minimum wage and other things that we're trying to do. This isn't going to help. You know it's not going to help. Now, we appreciate the fact that the sponsor is willing to consider amendments. Well, amendments, of course, are fine, but you're still going to be left with the very same problem, a very large increase in the sales tax on services. And no matter how you cut it, the bottom line goes right to the consumer, and that means an increase in the living Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Seeing no questions, we'll dismiss this panel. Is Tom Ballantyne here? All right, in that case, we will bring up the next panel, S. Mona Reza, Tyler Bennett, James Golden, Beth Caro, and Michael McGurk Sr. It looks like we do have another seat, so I'll call up Alexander Austin. Is Sid Saab here? Our former colleague? All right, so in that case, for the benefit of my colleagues, this will be the last in-person panel, and then we will go to virtual witnesses. You can begin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the Ways and Means Committee. I'm Alexander Austin, President and CEO of the Prince George's Chamber of Commerce. We represent over 740 businesses within Prince George's County and the region. And more than 50% of our membership are small businesses that fall within the categories listed within House Bill 1515 and will be severely impacted by the legislation. 42% of that number fall within the professional business services. They are professional business services firms. I'd like to highlight that House Bill 1550 will also impact populations and demographics of you, as you've heard earlier, that have been traditionally underserved. Demographics such as minority and women-owned businesses, which have grown in number, but not in revenue. In our assessment with businesses in our ecosystem, the tax cost to businesses will be offset to the customer, and this will force price increase to the customer and further destabilize the business's ability to grow and the ability to be sustainable. We request unfavorable report of House Bill 1515. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and esteemed members of the Ways and Means Committee. I am Beth Caro, a small business owner supporting the transportation sector with over 20 years experience. With operations in Annapolis, urging an unfavorable vote based on the current economic challenges faced by Maryland's small businesses. My company, based in Annapolis with 2 locations, plays a crucial role in the vehicle titling and registration industry as an MDOT MVA licensee. We employ and train Maryland residents from Anne Arundel and neighboring counties, contributing significantly to the state's revenue through accurate valuation of purchase prices and corresponding excise taxes. Our title offices in Maryland operate under tight profit margins, allowing only a nominal service fee for our transactions to remain competitive in the market. Any additional fees will risk losing customers to other businesses. As a growing small business owner entering the 2nd year of sole woman business ownership, I operate in an industry already burdened by regulations and licensing requirements in Maryland's transportation sector, impacting businesses ranging from car washes to auto repair shops to simply applying a license plate to your car. The proposed bill, House Bill 1515, would substantially escalate business cost onto business as owners and to our customers, hindering our ability to serve the Maryland public efficiently. This financial burden comes at a time when the small business community is striving to recover from the loss of nearly 40,000 small businesses since this last bill's attempt in 2020 and the challenges proposed by the pandemic. In conclusion, I appreciate your attention to this matter and look for an unfavorable report on House Bill 1515. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and committee. I'm here as not only as a small business owner, but also as a resident of the state of Maryland. I'm James Golden, and I'm founder and owner of Golden Consulting, which is providing information technology services to small businesses in Maryland for over 22 years. Along with providing IT consulting and IT support services, I also sell commercial software such as Microsoft Office and computer hardware. With the digital products tax that was first enacted in 2021, I've seen firsthand the challenges of new taxes imposed on services and trying to determine and track what is taxable and what is not. I've also seen the cost to businesses to figure this out, purchasing or upgrading software to accommodate, and then the time required to remit taxes on a regular basis. It's already been mentioned about certain services able to be received from out of the state, but I'd also ask the committee to consider even about the software purchases that businesses would need to handle this new tax collection and tracking, and how most of the software providers are going to be out of state or perhaps even out of the country. The end result will be more money going out of state or even out of the country to software vendors and developers, but not benefiting Maryland taxpayers at all. Many businesses will need to hire employees or outsource for this task, a task that has no benefit to the bottom line of a business, but increases the cost of doing business. These are all additional expenses that ultimately will be passed on to consumers. Microsoft Windows 10 will be retired next year. To remain secure, businesses need to upgrade to Windows 11. A lot of older systems cannot support Windows 11, which means businesses of all sizes will need to purchase new computers. Computer hardware and software is already taxable, but with HB 1515, businesses will also need to pay taxes on the services to install and configure the computers they've already paid taxes on, putting increased financial burdens on businesses. This double taxation isn't unique to the IT industry or on businesses, though. It's easy to see an elderly couple who needs their roof replaced, struggling now to pay taxes not only on the roofing materials used, but also on the installation. Likewise, it's easy to picture an elderly widow living on a fixed income, needing a new water heater and not being able to afford to tax any heater on the installation. Instead of taking the easy way out and raising taxes on Maryland residents and businesses need to see our legislators implement spending cuts and responsible spending.
Thank you.
I
Please
therefore
wrap
request an
up.
unfavorable rating. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Tyler Bennett on behalf of the Maryland Alliance of YMCAs. I will try to keep it brief. One thing I don't believe that we've heard discussed today is the potential expansion of this tax onto gym memberships. I think we would all agree that a physically fit population and a healthier population would lead to less healthcare costs in the future. I wouldn't want to see somebody who, when they fall on tougher times and they're looking at those monthly expenses, seeing that gym membership go up and potentially, have to put that on the chopping block and make that decision. Another thing I would also point out is, I think you're starting to see a lot more businesses that are offering gym memberships or reimbursement for gym memberships as a benefit. And this could potentially increase those costs and make it less likely for employers to be able to offer that, because I know it's, it could seem small for one individual, but as you add that across an entire employment base, that's a substantially greater cost. So we would urge the committee to look at that moving forward in these discussions. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Mona Reza. I am a tax attorney, and I am testifying today as the chairperson of the Greenbelt Business Alliance. We are a membership organization representing business owners and nonprofits in Greenbelt, Maryland, a thriving city in Prince George's County. We are opposing the passage of House Bill 1515 for a number of reasons. While we understand the need for the income that can be generated from the taxation of services, we strongly believe that this bill is unnecessarily broad and will have the unintended consequence of driving business away from our state. The members of the Greenbelt Business Alliance are representative of small business owners throughout the state. We are dependent on one another to run our businesses because we cannot afford in-house teams of lawyers, accountants, tech support, and janitorial services. I've spoken with members of the Greenbelt business community, restaurant owners, physicians, auto repair shops, attorneys, and realtors. What we all agree on is that the cost of doing business has increased across the board. Consumers are already reaching their breaking point on absorbing these costs. My colleagues at the Bar Association have covered some of the things that happen when you don't use attorneys and accountants. So I'll skip that and say that the failure to do that would lead to headaches down the road for business owners and the state alike. We want to encourage businesses to seek help in the areas that they are not experts in. Adding an additional 5% tax on these services is a burden the market may not be able to bear. We are proud to do business in Maryland. We do not want to become one of a handful of states that impose this regressive tax on its citizens. As always, the burden will be greatest on the citizens who are the most economically disadvantaged. An additional 5% for auto repair, haircuts, even funeral services. The list is long and it impacts all aspects of our daily lives. When Greenbelt, Maryland was recently chosen as the site of the new FBI headquarters, the first factor cited in the GSA press release was the low cost to taxpayers. Our hope is that the FBI site will bring business and new residents to Greenbelt in the region. We must ask ourselves how Maryland will fare in future bids if it joins only 4 states that do not include Virginia and the district in imposing a service tax on its citizens and business owners. For these reasons, we oppose this bill.
Thank you so much to this panel. I don't see any questions, so you are dismissed. I want to check to see if Sid Saab is with us or Michael McGurk. Also, if you are in the audience and you believe you signed up and you were not called, that means that we've missed you.
Ability to talk. I signed up, but I wasn't called.
Let me check to see if you're on the list. What's your name?
Darren Clark, Clark Computer Services.
Darren Clark.
Yep.
I don't see you on the list, but please proceed for 2 minutes.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, Madam or Vice Chair. This is the first time I've ever testified, so forgive me if I don't do very well. But my name is Darren Clark, and I own a technology services business, Clark Computer Services and Clark Building Technologies. We have locations in Washington County, Frederick County, and Baltimore City. And I'm here representing 40 employees. We do business here in Maryland. We've been in business since 2003. We have 40 Maryland employees. We service over 1,200 Maryland businesses, and we subcontract to over 200 Maryland small businesses. Applying a 5% sales tax on my services is just going to hurt my business. In the end, it's going to hurt my employees, and it's going to hurt the small businesses that rely on me for a portion of their revenue. I'm going to lose sales because of HB 1515. And for my business to survive, I'm going to have no other choice but to purchase off large business so I can reduce my cost. And I may need to lay off employees, which I think is not going to help people here in the state of Maryland. It's hard for me to understand why anyone would think applying a 5% sales tax on services here in Maryland is a good idea. We haven't fully recovered from COVID yet. We just made it through a recession. The cost of living has increased everywhere, and now you're going to put a 5% burden on my employees, which is exactly where it's going to go when they go to the grocery store to buy something. Taxes are going to trickle down to them. They're the ones that pay the price for it. And many of your staff members, they're young and they can't afford it, just like my employees can't afford it. I beg of you, oppose HB 1515. It's not just bad for small businesses, it's bad for every consumer here in the state of Maryland.
Thank you, sir. Seeing no questions, thank you for your time. We'll now move into our virtual witnesses and we'll bring them into the room. Margie Graff, Kevin Fox, Kathy Goetz, Vince Ryan, and Sabrina Scott. Margie, you can begin.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, I'm Margie Graff, President and CEO of the Greater Rockville Chamber of Commerce in Montgomery County. Our position is unfavorable for House Bill 1515. While it would lower the sales tax from 6% to 5%, it would expand it to everyday services, including legal services, realtor services, home improvements, auto services, etc., which is most of our small business members that will be affected. When starting a business, it's very important for them to have a strong foundation on which to build, which means having an attorney, having an accountant, advertising, marketing, PR. With this additional tax, they might forgo these services. Small businesses rely on outside services, while larger companies can utilize in-house expertise for the newly taxable services at no additional cost. A tax on services puts Maryland businesses at a compelling disadvantage relative to other states. I believe only Hawaii, New Mexico, and South Dakota have this tax. Implementation of a tax on services presents a tremendous administrative burden, particularly for small businesses. Service providers, many of whom are independent contractors and small business owners, will now have to face a new administrative burden. Other states like Florida and Michigan have tried to tax a broad range of services, only to quickly repel them due to the complexity of administration, among other reasons. There's a widespread opposition to this bill from many segments of the business community, including my peers in Montgomery County. Our members, mostly from the small business community, are equally as concerned about the impact that this would have on their ability to create jobs, grow, and thrive in Maryland. Instead, may I suggest looking at Delegate Carr's Fair Share for Maryland Act. instead of putting this tax on the backs of small businesses. For these reasons, the Greater Rockville Chamber of Commerce respectfully requests unfavorable report on House Bill 1515. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. We'll go to Kathy Goetz next.
Hi, thank you. My name is Kathy Gatz, and I am an accountant, a new business here in Maryland. Most of my clients are very small individuals, small businesses with no employees or very few. And I would like to explain a few things that hasn't been mentioned yet. One, businesses set their prices at tolerance levels. And so when you don't have a firsthand view of businesses, you think there's extra money there. And I want to tell you there isn't. A lot of my clients are in tears. I've had some clients who have lost their businesses. They can get increasing debts. Being a small business owner does not mean that you have a minimum income. It does not mean that you have a maximum debt. Their expenses are large. Some of them are only hanging on by the skin of their teeth, hoping that someday they will make a profit. So I want to tell you how, from an accountant point of view, this looks. You might have a wife of somebody who's making $250,000. And because she's a side hustle, she might have an income to her business of over 100,000, but it's all contracted out. So by the time this bill comes, her expenses can be more than her income. If it is less, if you look at it side by side and you create a scenario to where she has 10,000 net income, what this bill would do on 90,000 of service costs would be a 45% reduction to her income. And at that point, the husband says, we don't need your money. Stay home and take care of the kids. Do you know what that's like for a woman to hear that? That your value has been decreased and there's no hope for you to be able to stay and maintain? That is one area. You talk about spa services, luxury services, as if the people who get those are the ones paying the bills. It isn't. It's a business owner. I have an owner whose wife is that they're in debt from different things. Debt is at 30%. That's money that leaves our state.
Thank you. Please wrap up. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you so much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. You can proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Vince Ryan on behalf of the American Council of Life Insurers. We represent 290 life insurance companies doing business nationwide and in the state of Maryland. We're here today to express the same concerns that we had in 2020, which is the bill's deletion of Section 11-219, which provides for an exemption of insurance services from the sales tax. And by doing away with this carve out, this bill would lead to unintended consequences, placing the burden of increased costs on consumers who rely on access to our products. Just by way of background, our companies and products already face a host of taxes and fees. At the state level, we're generally taxed on the premiums that we take in. States have retained the premium tax because it produces a substantial amount of revenue already in comparison to the corporate income tax. And by subjecting insurers and our products to this tax, this bill will impose a double tax on insurers who, again, have a direct tax on our premiums, and this will hinder our ability to deliver services at a competitive prices. This bill will also put Maryland at a kind of a crippling disadvantage. No other state has expanded their sales tax to insurance services or our products. And so, in imposition of a sales tax on insurance services and insurance agent commissions is really only going to lead to inequities in the marketplace, increased costs that will ultimately be paid by Maryland consumers. And for these reasons, we ask that the bill be given an unfavorable report.
Thank you so much to this panel of virtual witnesses. I don't see any questions, and our other virtual witnesses are not in the Zoom room. So that is going to conclude our hearings for today on House Bill 1515. And we thank you so much for your time. Colleagues, we are going to vote in the Ways and Means Committee at 3 p.m. today, 3 p.m. So we'll see you back here at 3. And if you can hold on for a second as well. Thank you.